What's going on, everybody? It is Overreaction Time once again. I'm your host, Simon Samano, and with me this week for the post-UFC 317 edition of ORT, it is none other than the Boston shot caller, Nolan King. Nolan, what's up, my man? How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. I'm happy to be on after such a great event. Definitely, there's no lack of talking points this week because a lot happened on Saturday. I'm excited to discuss it with you.
We've got things to talk about for sure, so let's jump right into it. You ready to get this thing going?
Let's do it.
All right, Kamikaze, you know what time it is. Hit it.
I mean, guys, what are you fucking? Is this tonight's stupid question night? Are you guys that fucking stupid? You can't be that fucking stupid. Who gives a shit? One of the dumbest things I've ever read in my life. Fucking common sense. Everybody knows that.
All right, Nolan, here we go now, man. And let me just start by saying, wow at the top of the card of UFC 317, where Ilia Topuria made good on his word and then some, man. Knocking out Charles Oliveira in under 3 minutes in the UFC 317 main event to become the lightweight champion of the world. 2-division champion now after he vacated his featherweight title heading into this fight. And Nolan, there's so much going on with Ilia coming out of this fight. Comparisons to Conor McGregor. A lot of big talk about Ilia. And I'm going to go ahead and just hit you with this, man, because it hit me as I was watching that moment Saturday night. Ilia Topuria is the next Conor McGregor.
I think that's a little bit of an overreaction.
You didn't think so at first, though, man.
I just think a Conor level, I don't know if that'll ever be replicated. Like, I think it's an unfair thing to put on anybody, right? That sort of comparison. But he's pretty damn close. In today's modern UFC, I think he's about as close as you can get. Representing a nation, he's got the looks, he's got the fighting style, and he has that air of invincibility that we haven't seen for a while, right? Like, that's, I think part of it is the UFC matchmaking is a little bit different than it was during Conor's era. But also the fact that we just haven't had somebody really go out there and become a champion where we hadn't seen them face some sort of adversity or some sort of pushback or some sort of battle, right? You look at the biggest stars that the UFC's had breakthrough in the last like 3 or 4 years. Alex Pereira, you know, we saw him lose in kickboxing. We saw him get knocked out by Izzy, and then he came back and he was a bigger star, right? So, but at the same time, he didn't have that sort of, can this guy lose? Is this guy on the next level sort of thing? And the same thing with Sean O'Malley. He had so many critics. There were a number of different people, I believe, that thought he lost that Petr Yan fight. So there were certain, the Cheeto thing with his leg, right? So there were certain things that we saw him, these stars stumble, and we haven't seen that from Ilia yet. So I think he's close. He might be the closest thing, or he might even be that for today's era, but I don't think with the landscape of MMA that it'll even be possible for there ever to be another Conor McGregor.
Oh, man. Okay, so you're saying it's not possible, just kind of the landscape of the UFC, the way they sort of under promote their fighters and don't over promote them the way they did during Conor's day, right? Like actual push.
Yeah, there's no build anymore to me. Like, and it's all about putting fighters in slots. And sure, there's some, you know, once you get up in the contenders, I think there is some really deep thinking when it comes to matchmaking, but a lot of it is dictated by the schedule, needing title fights on certain pay-per-views, you know, signing deals with certain locations to bring them certain sorts of cards or things that they're happy with. So there's a lot more at play here where you it's almost like sometimes the star building, or a lot of times the star building kind of comes secondary. So again, maybe I'll be proven wrong. It's hard to say that a shooting star is going to come twice until it's here. I think Ilia is very, very close, but I think just, again, the brand has almost become the star at this point, and I think it will be hard for somebody to kind of break out of that.
But here's an X factor here, though, man. The UFC wants to break into Spain, right? They want to break into a new market, okay? And I think one of the things that we may not understand right now at this moment, maybe not completely American fans here, is maybe how big Ilia Topuria is across the pond in the UK, in Spain, in that part of the world. And so to me, that's the part that I think really can set Ilia over the top. And maybe the UFC will come around and pushing this guy because they are going to need him. They are going to need him when they break into that market. So that would be it. Now, let me just hit you with this, though, here, Nolan. The thing about the Conor McGregor comparison as well is not just the stardom, but, dude, he's already surpassed Conor McGregor in terms of the point that he's gotten to, the resume that he has. Dude, he's already got a better resume than Conor McGregor has in totality. I mean, think about the road to get here, man. do you not think, and I can't think off the top of my head, this is a lot of recency bias, and there may be a lot of recency bias on this show because there's a lot of stuff that just happened this past weekend, but I can't think of a greater 3-fight stretch for one fighter in the history of the UFC to knock out Alexander Volkanovski, to knock out Max Holloway, to knock out Charles Oliveira in 3 consecutive title fights, 2 featherweight goats, and then Charles Oliveira, who's probably a top 5 lightweight of all time, a top 3 lightweight of all time. I mean, he's already surpassed Conor McGregor in that respect with his resume.
Yeah, in cage, certainly. I mean, he has a title defense, right? So there's one.
Yeah, there's already that.
There's checked off the list. So I mean, it's arguably the greatest. I'd have to really comb over, but I really haven't seen a strong argument to the contrary that is could very well be the best 3-fight winning streak in UFC history to knock off 2 of the greatest 3 featherweights of all time in brutal fashion, and then one of the greatest lightweights of all time, and to just make it look easy. You know, I know that the Volk gave him a little bit of pushback in their fight, but outside of that, again, it's so minimal. It's really like grabbing its, pulling for straws, or whatever the expression is, trying to find, those little things. Oh, did he mess up here? You know, I saw a clip of people rewinding Oliveira hitting him with an elbow in this fight, and like, oh, look at his chin. And to me, again, it's looking for a needle in a haystack. There's been so much good that's come out of these performances and not a lot of bad. So tremendous amount of credit. And like you said, I mean, in terms of in-cage accomplishments, I certainly back the fact that he's already surpassed Conor McGregor in that regard.
We've even got those iconic images now you can put side to side of Conor McGregor and this fight, with the hammer fist coming down on the Brazilian legends, dude. It's eerie. It's eerie. The Conor McGregor comparisons. It's just, it's the trajectory is there, man. We'll see what's up. I do think I will just end with this final thing. It's interesting that, Sean O'Malley was supposed to be the next Conor McGregor, Paddy Pimblett was supposed to be the next Conor McGregor. And maybe Paddy will get there, but he's clearly taken a slow rise. I mean, the fact that Ilia Topuria, this Spanish-Georgian fighter who's come out of nowhere, right, in the last few years, and he's the one that we're now talking about, at least maybe it's an overreaction and you don't agree he is Conor McGregor yet, but man, he's there. He's in the ballpark. It's amazing what Ilia Topuria has done, man. So all right, let's move on to the next thing, but we're going to keep talking about Ilia Topuria because after his knockout win over Charles Oliveira, we got a face-off in the cage, man. We got a face-off in the cage with Paddy Pimblett and Ilia Topuria, and it seemed like it wasn't expected, dude. It was interesting the way the camera flashed to Arman, it flashed to Justin Gaethje, it flashed to Ilia, and the camera stuck on Ilia because he was talking. And then we had the face-off, and we know that there's history between these guys, Noli. Now, at the time of this recording, I should acknowledge, before I give you my overreaction here, I should acknowledge that it seems Dricus du Plessis may have leaked the fact that the UFC 319 co-main event could be between Paddy Pimblett and Justin Gaethje. But I'm going to go ahead and just say it anyways right now, Noli. The UFC would be foolish to not book Ilia Topuria versus Paddy Pimblett next.
I don't think that's an overreaction. I think it would be a very smart move in terms of business. I mean, we talk about, it's weird, right? Because I play devil's advocate with myself a little bit, where I'm always like, we should do merit-based matchmaking. This should be more like a regular sport. Yep. There's always going to be a certain amount of decision, like the human element of matchmaking, right? Because you and I could sit down in certain scenarios and argue about whether Justin Gaethje or Arman Sarukian deserves it. But then you see somebody that's a little bit, in terms of their accomplishments, doesn't have to that level, which is Paddy Pimblett, but it sells pay-per-views. I think not only that, but I also think it's a very, again, does the promotion have a hand in what they want the outcome to be? I don't know. But like, to me, Ilia Topuria, this is a very favorable fight for him. So if you do want to take him to that Conor level, you can give him somebody that he has a big rivalry with, somebody that I think on paper is he's a really bad matchup for. And then on the flip side, I mean, Pimblett's also a big star, right? If he were to go out there, probably he would enter the fight as an underdog. If he go out there and beat Ilia, this guy that's rising, I think it would take him to some certain sort of level that we haven't seen before too. So I think there's a lot to be gained here. I mean, Arman Sarukian should be the guy. Like if I was going to be on the merit-based brain here, but I think that the Paddy Pimblett fight is the one that would be a good business move and a good investment for the UFC. So not an overreaction.
But I'm with you, man. I get you. I go back and forth. I just think every now and then I'm 9 times out of 10 I'm going to be the merit based guy. Okay, I believe in rankings. I believe in the resume and all that stuff. And what have you done for me lately? I really do. But every now and then a situation just comes along that just sort of like supersedes. And this is not egregious in my opinion. This isn't like an egregious thing. Paddy Pimblett's
Right.
not ranked number 11 or 12 or 13. He's just outside the top 5 right now, ready to break into the top 5. And we've done worse. The UFC has done worse. They've given Khalil Roundtree a title shot when he's outside the top 5, recently, right? So like it's not bad. And let me just tell you, man, like the UFC, they owe us this one. They owe us this fight, okay? They didn't make Ilia Topuria versus Islam Makhachev, all right? They failed to make Tom Aspinall against Jon Jones. They owe us this one, dude. Don't you agree? This is the one that they owe us. They owe us this one. It is perfect timing for an MSG main event or the last event of the year to go out with the bang. It's got to happen, Noli. It's got to happen, dude.
I think for active fighters, you'd be hard pressed to find a fight that would probably grab more attention, right? Like there's obviously, I'd have to sit here and think, but that's the one off the top of my head that I think would attract the most eyeballs. And again, we always talk about, I think in our sport, we have our hardcore brains. We're in this every day. We know the fights that we would like to see, but which ones also kind of push the ceiling as to what would get other people that are kind of casuals or maybe aren't even really interested in the sport. Like, the Spanish market is not necessarily the most MMA fan heavy sort of,
right.
scene. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I think this would check a lot of boxes for the UFC, and it's got to be tempting, for a company that does a good job of making a lot of money to see potential dollar signs on the table. You'd think that would be something that they would want to capitalize on.
Yeah. You kind of touched on it a little bit. So let's just close with this. As you look at potentially that fight happening, they exchanged words, and Paddy was very, very insistent that you're not knocking me out. You're not knocking me out. I don't know. Do you think that fight ends that way? Do you think it would end with?
I've said this before and spinning back, like I feel like I owe Paddy Pimblett an apology because I have been picking against him for quite a while now. Not that I have anything against him.
And he's my ride or die in 2025, man.
Yeah, I still have like flashbacks to him in his first couple UFC fights being a heavy favorite and getting dropped or getting rocked and stuff. It seemed like his striking defense was his striking defense has always been his biggest problem or one of them. So his ground game's obviously sick at this point. I think it's pretty elite, but I still think going in there with Topuria, a guy who's got that grappling credential himself, I think it would be hard for Paddy Pimblett not to absorb a serious blow at some point during that fight. And I think ultimately Topuria will get it done inside the distance by knockout.
Wow.
Or TKO.
I hope we get the opportunity to see that happen. Let's make it happen, UFC. Let's get it going. Hell, let's get a Conor Jose Aldo World Tour style thing going, man.
Love it.
I'm all in, dude. Let's
need
bring
those
it
promos
back.
too.
Let's
no
bring
Church
it back.
In the Wild,
you do
Kanye
it.
West.
You do it in Spain. You do it somewhere in the UK. You do it in New York. You do it in Vegas. Let's do it, man. That's what I want to see. Let's build this fight up because, man, it's got so much tension and it could be such a great fight. I'm not going to get my hopes up. I'm going to come down from my overreaction now because I've been disappointed quite a few times this year already with matchmaking. Okay, let's move on now, Noli, to the next thing I want to talk about from UFC 317. That's the co-main event where Alexandre Pantoja, man, another impressive performance, really just sliced and diced through Kai Kara France and getting the submission in the third round in impressive fashion, dude. Now, I went to go look at the UFC rankings, and because I wasn't actually quite sure where Pantoja was, and I'm shocked. I'm shocked where he was at going into this fight. And now I'm going to go ahead and hit you with this, Noli. We got to put some respect on Alex Pantoja's name and acknowledge him as a clear top 5 pound-for-pound fighter.
No, not an overreaction at all. I think that's spot on. I mean, the guy, again, we talk about the new era, fighters coming in and out. It's hard for champions to hold their belt. So for a guy to pile up, sequential title defenses over and over and over again, and relatively make it relatively look easy. He's had some battles in there for sure, but I mean, we've also seen him just totally run through guys. And that division right now, with the exception of Joshua Van, who emerged on Saturday, would be a lot of rematches for Pantoja. I know we got Kopp sitting there, but like Royval, who just lost, there was talk of him maybe being in there instead of France. So that would have been a rematch. Brandon Moreno would have been a rematch. So when you start having that sort of vibe to the division, I think ultimately the respect should fall to the champion. And I don't think it's an overreaction at all that he should be in the top 5. I mean, just with like you said, 4 title defenses, like easily should be in that top 5.
Yeah, and he's making it look great, man. And it's 5 consecutive title fight wins when you count the fact that he beat Brandon Moreno for the title.
Yeah.
Dude, it was just seeing him work on Saturday night was masterful. I mean, it was masterful. And the way he worked the back and the way he snuck in that submission, dude. I mean, Pantoja is just leveling up with each fight, it feels like, doesn't it?
Yeah, no doubt. And I'm actually very surprised, when you just dropped that fact on me that he's not in the top 5. He's currently sitting at number 9, which is kind of wild. Yeah.
Crazy going into this fight, right?
I mean, look at, like, for example, shout out, no disrespect to Jack Della Maddalena or Ankalaev, but like
how did they jump right ahead of him? Right.
I don't understand. Or even Dricus, I don't understand that. Like, if you wanted to make the argument that Islam was above him, maybe, or Marab, or I don't know. You just look at the division, you say those guys just feel more dominant, even though they don't have necessarily the title defenses to back it up. That's an argument that could be made, but just because I think it's just a disrespect to the flyweight divisions, what's going on here. I don't think it's anything beyond that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I got no problem with Islam, Marab, and Ilia being ranked ahead of him, but I do take umbrage pretty much after that.
Yeah, I agree.
Dricus maybe is borderline, but I mean, to me, he would be number 4. I mean, but ahead of Volk, ahead of Jack Della Maddalena, ahead of Tom Aspinall, ahead of Alex Pereira. I mean, that's where the UFC should have him after this week. I should note, though, Nolan, that the MMA Junkie rankings, we have him number 3 in the pound for pound rankings, which is pretty much where we just said he belongs. So shout out to Gorgeous George and the MMA Junkie rankings, because we got him right where he should be. And hey, we'll see what happens now, right? Because I don't know if he's going to jump. He's coming at a time when Ilya's coming off this impressive knockout. So we'll see what happens in the rankings for MMA Junkie. But yeah, he should make a huge jump into that top 5 in the UFC rankings moving forward here.
Totally agree.
Okay, man. Now let's jump off. Let's now talk about the banger of a fight on UFC 317, and that was Joshua Van against Brandon Royval. Dude, that was a heck of a fight. I mean, so much so, Nolan, that I'm just gonna go ahead and start by giving you the overreaction. You tell me where you think where you stand here. Joshua Van's win over Brandon Royval is the new fight of the year frontrunner.
I don't think it's an overreaction, but obviously there's certain things that everybody enjoys in a fight. But for me personally, I loved it for 2 reasons. One is I think that there's an element of mayhem and violence that you could have 2 guys on the prelims and you watch it and you're like, this is kind of sloppy, but like it's so fun to watch, right? And then on the flip side, you could see a title fight that maybe doesn't have that sort of slobber knocker feel to it, but the guys, you can just tell they're super good, they're technical. There's maybe some more subtle momentum changes, but you really appreciate the fight for what it is. This fight was the crossroads of both of those sort of avenues. It was just a tremendous fight. It was violent. It was 2 guys that had the defensive abilities, but seemed to lean on their offense more. Super confident. Even at the end there. I mean, one of the best sequences in the fight came in the last 30 seconds. So it's I get that the UFC can't make every fight 5 rounds. Even some of the important ones. If we want a good pay-per-view, it's going to be 3. But that made me hungry to see them fight 2 more. So I totally think it's certainly on the short list, and it could be. Again, it's all relative. But yeah, that's not an overreaction at all. I freaking loved that fight. I thought it was one of the more engaging. It was one of the better moments too of a supporting act in a pay-per-view in a while. It felt we were through 2 fights from the main event, and it felt like you were watching something pretty big and special. And obviously, Joshua Van breaks in as the next title challenger. So big fan of that, the way the whole thing played out on Saturday.
Yeah, I know we use terms like banger and firefight often, but that was like a firefight, dude, because those guys were just trading punches.
I was getting goosebumps. It's been a minute. Like, again, going into it, I was excited for it. I was like, oh, this is a great fight. I'm glad they came together, even if it was short notice or whatever. But yeah, by the end of it, it way exceeded my expectations. It was just a really pure moment, and showed kind of the best elements of the sport all at once.
It was like popcorn popping inside of a popcorn man, like pop, 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 pop. It was just punch after punch after punch, dude. And those combinations were sick, man. And they were both landing. I can't believe the volume. What was the number there, Nolan? What was the unofficial number afterwards? Something like 400 and something on the strikes.
It was something crazy. It was, I mean, the flyweight division, I'm so glad. Like, I know it's kind of an echo chamber at this point, but I'm definitely so glad that the UFC did not scrap it. You know, the fact that some of the fights that we would have been robbed of, you know, looking at it now, just pulling up the stats for that one, it was 200 and Royval was 216 of 468 strikes landed, and Joshua Van was 209 of 311 strikes. So between the two of them, they threw close to 800 strikes in 3 rounds. Significant
Landed
strikes
over
were
400 of them.
around
Wow.
702 of those were significant strikes. So not only were they throwing a lot, but it was some serious heat on it. So just a tremendous fight, no matter which direction you look at it.
Dude, that's nuts, man. And that was, mind you, that was Joshua Van fighting 3 weeks ago, right?
Twice in 22 days. I mean, his schedule has been nuts since he started. I can't believe that he only started at, you know, as a pro. I think it's been like 4 years, and he's fought 17 or 18 times in like essentially 3.5 years. Nuts.
All right. Noli, this is the perfect segue now. Okay. So let's go from the fight to now talking about Joshua Van, because now I'm going to give you the floor after I give you my overreaction here about Joshua Van. This is not an overreaction at all, dude. Joshua Van's rise is the best feel-good story of 2025 in MMA.
Yeah, it's up there.
The floor is yours, my friend. I know you've talked to this guy and you followed his rise. The floor is yours, Noli.
Not an overreaction. You know, he's always been a kind of an interesting character. You know, he caught my eye on the regional scene because he was, I think at the time, like 20 or 21, and he was already kind of starting to take some tougher tests than you'd expect a guy with 3, 4, 5 pro fights to take. And, you know, looking at his resume, he was fighting like, or trying to fight, you know, never mind all the fights that got canceled for him too. Like he was essentially trying to fight all the time. Like pretty much every other show that Fury would hold, they would be trying to match him up, and it would be a struggle to find people to fight him. But eventually he built up enough experience. He broke through with the short notice fight in the UFC, and it's just been go since. I mean, he's fought since he lost to Charles Johnson last year. He fought 5 times since then. I think that was like over the summer, the Johnson fight, and then fought 5 times.
July 2020. Yep. And then he fought in September.
So five times in 11 months. He went 5-0. Fought twice in 22 days. You know, again, and the thing is too, like if he was getting beat up and stuff, maybe you'd be like, okay, like this dude needs to chill out. He's going to hurt himself. Which you would think maybe would happen just from training anyway, but it just hasn't. You know, he's had some really dominant performances recently that's allowed him to turn around quickly. And his rate of improvement is not something I don't think I've seen. Like usually with these guys that do this, they end up burning out, they end up biting off more than they can chew, and it turns out to be a very detrimental thing for their career. But for him, it's been the opposite. I mean, his stock has grown. He took a big risk on Saturday taking that fight when he had just fought. And he goes out there and just totally capitalizes on the moment. I mean, how many times have we seen the UFC do those face-offs in the cage, right? For a flyweight fight, like maybe never. So it's very rare that they do it. You really have to impress them to really make it that they think, oh, on Tuesday we're not going to sit down and want anybody else. We're going to want this one guy.
Knew. Yeah.
And so just he checked a lot of boxes. Really impressive stuff for a guy that you know has had kind of an interesting road to even, you know, it's just to this country from Myanmar and being the first, you know, Burmese UFC fighter as well. Like just a lot of the UFC is going to be thrilled with him. He's going to be thrilled. And just like you said, a really feel good story.
Then the feel good story is this. And I want to make sure I lean into that even more because, you know, just 3 weeks ago, we found out that he bought his mom a house after his UFC 316 win. I mean, come on, man. That's as feel good as it gets. He was featured on Embedded during the week, singing at his church. You know, I mean, come on, man. That's as feel good as it gets. You know, this seems like one of the nicest guys, right, that you maybe would come across, a mama's boy, right? But in the cage, this dude is an absolute killer, dude. I mean, and that's, I guess that's kind of what makes him scary, right? Is like such a nice guy, but he's a killer in the cage, dude. What's your early take, though, now on him jump after this win? Now, you know, I was going to come in here and hit you with what I thought would be an overreaction, that he deserves it. I don't think that's an overreaction at all. He deserves to fight for the title next after he's going to jump from number 11 to beating the number 1 guy in the division. But what's your early take on 23 years old, only 5 years of training? We just talked about Alexandre Pantoja being one of the top 5 pound-for-pound fighters in the world. What's your early take on that fight, Nolan? I got to hear it.
Yeah, it's going to come down to Josh's wrestling. You know, I don't think we've necessarily seen it a ton, especially more recently when he's gotten these really bangery sort of fights like he got on Saturday. But the thing is, again, like his rate of improvement is so crazy that if he throws on the wrestling shoes this camp and just really focuses on that, who am I to say that, you know, Pantoja is not going to struggle with him? So I think it's a really interesting matchup. And conversely, Pantoja, In terms of pure boxing, I don't know off the top of my head if he's fought any. Obviously Moreno's a decent striker. Royval's kind of a funky look. Car France, I guess, is maybe more of the traditional boxing sort of city kickboxing style. But to me, I think it's a really interesting fight in that it's kind of uncharted territory, I think, for both guys. So I think it will be a tough fight for Van. It's certainly he's going against a guy that's tremendously crafty and not afraid to make it ugly, which I think is what Pantoja is going to have to do. But at the same time, I don't want to rule out Van's ability to get better in a short period of time.
Yeah, man, it's going to be a hell of a fight to look forward to. I can't wait. When do you think they'll do that? You think they'll do that in November? December?
Van's has broken. I think he said in the presser that he had fought with a broken big toe. So I don't know if that will take some time off of this whole thing. I would say at the end of the year, though, November, December, maybe we're looking at. So that would be. I wouldn't hate that being a supporting act on the year-end show, something like that. Would probably be good for both guys.
Oh, he fought with the broken big toe? Did you know Conor McGregor pulled out of a fight with a broken pinky toe?
I heard something about that. I think I read about it on MMA Junkie. But
something about that, right? Yeah. Anyways. All right, dude. All right, let's talk about one more thing now. And I didn't think we were going to talk about Jon Jones. All right. So soon. But we are going to talk about Jon Jones a little bit, Nolan. Because last week, coming out of the retirement, as you know, Jon Jones is in the middle of a legal situation where he allegedly fled the scene of a hit and run and left a half-clothed woman behind in her car. Of course, there's the body cam footage that was revealed last week, and the voice on a phone call that was on her phone sounded like Jon Jones. Well, as you know, Jon Jones appeared to implicate himself being the voice on that phone. And so somehow, some way, we got a classic Jon Jones tweet and delete storm last week. And, I think we were all following along together in the work Slack. It was, a heck of a thing. And there's a lot of stuff that you'd have to go back and look at. But, dude, as I'm thinking about Jon Jones and how this is going with the retirement, I'm just going to go ahead and hit you with this one here, dude. You'll probably laugh when I say it. Jon Jones is already completely insufferable in retirement.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly one word for it. I don't think it's an overreaction. I don't particularly like. My take on Jon in the way that things ended might be a little unpopular. Like, I'm not. I don't feel that he, like, to me, the Tom Aspinall fight that didn't happen doesn't necessarily demean what he's accomplished in the cage for me as a whole. I think we oftentimes are talking about fighters like, look at Khabib, right? Or GSP. We said, oh, that's great. They kind of got away, they got away from the sport at a time where we didn't see them die, or we didn't see them lose. So for me, I'm not as I don't put as much weight into this whole thing. Like, if Jon had told you, Jon said the whole time, like, hey, I just want to do 2 more fights and be done. And sure, the fights that were not the fights that we wanted, they weren't necessarily hard fights for Jon. And then he got out before this big super fight was hyped forever and ever. I don't like the fence jumping of I'm in, I'm out, teasing, things like that. Especially if he did tell the UFC that he was going to do it and then he pulls out. So there's certain aspects of it that I really don't like. But I will say, I think that this latest legal issue and kind of the follow-up and some of the tweets and the video with what he said, who's the voice that's alleged to be him has said.
He may have implicated himself.
Yeah. To me, like, it's not if you look at Jon Jones' portfolio of legal issues, it's not maybe the worst one in terms of repercussions. I think it's like a misdemeanor charge, but like, I think the behavior, at least outwardly, is a bit more concerning than things that we've seen in the past. Like, obviously what he was saying in that call, some of the tweets that he's had at whatever time, 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. in Albuquerque time that really don't make sense. Like, those things are maybe a little bit more concerning, particularly where it's being projected to the world. So insufferable, concerning, something in that wheelhouse. I think this is maybe a next level in terms of at least what I've seen from him in terms of getting me a little bit worried and maybe a little bit more concerned about the whole thing.
Yeah, it wasn't even just the tweeting and deleting about the legal case. I mean, he was tweeting and deleting things about his legacy and his character and like defending himself as though he has never done anything wrong. I mean, there was one, I have to pull these up from our Slack channel, but there was one that was there where somebody said they hated Jesus too. He quote tweeted that. And he said, I wasn't even, this is Jon Jones saying, I wasn't even going to go there, but yes, you get it. Like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
There was another one that was like, F these haters. You can't be the GOAT without haters. Jon Jones quote tweets that one is like, Tom Brady, LeBron James, you name them. Very rarely can you be really good at something and have a bunch of people thinking how they would have done things differently. Even Muhammad Ali was absolutely hated by everyone at one point in his life. It comes with the territory. Like, dude, you are not Muhammad Ali, bro. I mean,
yeah,
Muhammad Ali was hated for not wanting to fight in a war that he felt was unjust. Anybody who's a Jon Jones hater is hating on him for doing things like leaving a half-naked woman in a car, allegedly, in a hit-and-run case. Not the same thing, Jon Jones.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see the world kind of, or try to, through his eyes. And I often wonder if it's like kind of the mad scientist sort of thing, right? Like, is this part of the reason that he was so successful in the cage, was that everything was kind of centric to him, right? It was everything that he couldn't do no wrong, that he kind of has this. And again, some of the tweets more recently doesn't make sense, but the overall vibes and the overall perception that we can kind of take away from some of the takes that Jon has, like comparing himself to Muhammad Ali, like I kind of think that it's sometimes people say stuff and they don't really believe it. I think he does believe it. And that's something, you know, I honestly wonder if that is part of the reason that he's had so much success in the cage and was on a different level, was because he kind of had maybe this slightly what we would perceive maybe as a bit warped perception of reality.
Of himself. Yeah. I don't know. It's just, to me, it's a little sad. I mean, it's just
MMA makes you put on a lot of hats, you know, so today I'm putting on my psychologist hat, but
at the end of the day, it's a little sad though. I mean, I get it. Jon Jones in this bubble of being a great MMA fighter, you know, feels good about himself, but in the grand scheme of things, like what's the end game here for Jon Jones, you know, in life, you know, like I think it was our own Matt Wells last week who brought back that old clip from before UFC 200 where Joe Rogan interviewed DC and Jon Jones together, and they basically were talking to each other, and you know, DC just laid it out there back then when he was much younger, right? When Jon Jones was still in his 20s, and he was like his late 20s, when he was like, this kid's just rotten to his core. He's never going to change, et cetera, right? Just putting him on blast for his character. And here we are now. Here he is, a grown man with kids, a fiance, all this stuff, and he's still getting into trouble. Even as he tells us he is living his best life, he just can't get right. I don't know, dude. I know that sounds like me being on a high horse, but I'm just tired of everybody making excuses for Jon Jones.
No, I think that's a very fair take. I think most people would probably agree with you, but yeah, it's unfortunate, right? Like seeing where the state of the stars are from, you know, the era of MMA that I grew up on, and from BJ Penn to Conor to Jon, like it's just kind of, it's sad. Again, there's great fighters that, you know, GSPs of the world and the Anderson Silvas that we can still kind of hang our hats on in terms of carrying the sport well and representing. But yeah, it's ultimately, it will always be a part of Jon's story, his legacy. And yeah, it's just, it's unfortunate, right?
It is, man. It is. All right, Nolan. Well, the time for overreacting has come to an end. I promise, guys, next week I'm going to try to keep Jon Jones out of the episode. I really promise that. Before we go, I do want to give a shout out to my Culver City Little League 11U All-Star team. We lost our first game, Nolan. We are now in the semifinals of our district championship. We played tonight against North Venice. Kids have been battling hard, and I just want to shout out to you boys. Let's go get them, all right? Nolan, I appreciate you for being on the show, man. I hope you had a good time again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. We'll do it again soon.
Yeah, we will do it again soon. I'm going to get you back more often because you know how to level my overreactions and hit me with some keen insight. I got to hear from you more often, Nolan. Keep me level, dude, because I get up here and you bring me back down, and that's why I appreciate having you on the show. And I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and until next week on ORT, we will see you then. Dana, take us away.
MMA Junkie AI.